So you've hired your first employee and now you're well on your way to setting up payroll. And one of the first things that you will have to decide is what's the right pay schedule for your business, or how often are you going to pay your employees? My name is Christina Hageny, president of Valor Payroll Solutions, and we help small business owners like yourself with payroll. So, when it comes to picking how often you're going to pay your employees, first and foremost, of course, we want to look at the law. Now, there's no federal law that dictates how often you have to pay employees, but each state is allowed to have their own laws. Not every state has them, but states that do often will separate the pay frequency requirements for exempt versus non exempt employees, with non-exempt usually being required to be paid more frequently. Now, the most frequently you can pay employees, other than the day pay earned wage access that we're seeing now, would be on a weekly pay frequency. Now, this pay frequency, unless you are required by state law or it is industry standard to where you won't be able to find and retain good talent without doing it, if one of those two things isn't true, I would highly suggest skipping the weekly payroll option. The reason for this is just a lot of work. Every single week, you're going to have to be doing payroll, collecting hours, answering questions about paychecks, dealing with missed punches, you name it. The work of doing payroll, actually keying the hours, that's not the hard part. The hard part is everything else that comes along with it, getting everything ready, handling your employees, and having to do that every single week is going to be a huge burden, especially for a small business owner that is handling payroll on their own or the one responsible for getting hours together. A lot of our clients, their average headcount is about 7 to 10 employees. So usually it is the business owner that's responsible for getting payroll handled. And that is not something that you want to be devoting time to every single week. This also creates more bank transactions, which leads to more to reconcile when you do your bookkeeping. And so at the end of the day, again, if it's industry standard to where you're not going to be able to find good people unless you do weekly payroll, or if it's required by state law, great. Otherwise, skip it and move on. The next would be biweekly. So that is where employees are paid every other week. For example, every other Friday. Now, this is a very good option for most businesses. And the reason is, number one, it's consistent. Your employees know when they're going to get paid. Whatever day of the week it is, it's every other Monday, every other Tuesday. You, likewise, will have the same day every other week to submit payroll, barring any holidays. So this makes it a consistent process, easy to manage. Another benefit of biweekly is that it always encompasses 2 full work weeks. So when you're thinking about calculating overtime, it makes it much easier and cleaner. You're not splitting the pay period, or you're not splitting the work week in the pay period. The one downfall to biweekly is that, of course, it doesn't fall into the accounting. My monthly will encompass 1 full month. It's going to be 14 days at a time. And then also, if you have benefits, then you have to decide if you want to do 24 or 26 deductions. I would suggest 24 and keep the deductions consistent each month throughout the year. Makes it much easier when you have new people or terminations. But then you have to, of course, remember to exclude those deductions when you have the months with 3 paychecks. Moving on, the next option would be semi-monthly. And semi-monthly and biweekly are often confused, but they are definitely not the same thing. Semi-monthly at face value sounds like the easiest, most enticing way to go. The 1st and the 15th, or the 5th and the 20th, or the 16th and the end of the month. But what business owners fail to realize is that, number one, even though you have set pay dates each month, those can change depending on weekends and holidays. 2, usually when payroll is due is dependent on a certain number of business days before the pay date. And so if your pay date falls on a Monday and you have to submit 2 business days prior, that's going to back you up to Thursday of the previous week. So the pay dates and when payroll is due is going to be more all over the place than people realize, even though you have set pay dates each month. just because those are going to fall on different days of the week, might fall on a weekend or holiday. Another thing is that with the semi-monthly, of course, if you have salaried people, they're getting 86.67 hours. And a lot of times business owners don't know how to prorate that if there is a new hire or a termination. Whereas with the biweekly pay schedule, it's a straight 8 hours per day, 80 hours per payroll. Semi-monthly is always going to be 86.67 hours, but sometimes that's for 10, 12 work days. So it gets a little bit trickier. Now, on the plus side with semi-monthly, it's usually going to be for one full month. So accounting really likes that. There's 24 payrolls in the year, so 2 fewer than the biweekly pay cycle. But again, unless you have all salaried people or are proficient in payroll or perhaps using a timekeeping system to help track overtime, then I would highly suggest steering clear of semi-monthly. And just a quick note on the overtime. Overtime is based on hours worked in a work week, which is always going to be a set defined period, Monday to Sunday or Saturday to, I don't think I have that right, but it's 7 full work days. With the semi-monthly pay schedule, that is not dependent on work weeks. So that is going to be based on calendar days, and you're always going to have the pay period splitting work weeks. So if you have a timekeeping system, usually not a big deal. It can track hours from the previous pay period and figure out if overtime was worked. But if you're doing things manually, that can become much trickier because you have to look at the prior payroll and that work week to determine if overtime was worked, and if so, paid in the current. And then we have, of course, the monthly pay frequency, which is nice if it's allowable. Oftentimes, states will not allow business owners to pay at least non-exempt employees on a monthly basis. So again, just double check your state's rules. But of course, minimal work, minimal effort, only processing once a month, as long as it's legal and your employees are okay with it, then this is a decent option. Most employees want to be paid more than once a month, though. So, depending on the nature of your business, your industry, and again, your state's rules, this doesn't always end up being a super viable option for small business owners. Now, we also have some payroll that we do quarterly, and that is usually for S Corp owners who are simply doing payroll for compliance purposes. So that is an option, but definitely not one if you have employees other than yourself. So again, you have weekly, which if it's required or industry standard, sure. Otherwise, move on. Biweekly, easy peasy, same every other week. You're submitting payroll on the same day, employees are getting paid on the same day. 2 full work weeks, definitely my recommendation for most small businesses. Semi-monthly, a little bit trickier, especially if you have hourly employees, but on the plus side, only 24 payrolls a year, fits the accounting period. Monthly, easy, not a favorite of most employees, and many states will not allow you to pay non-exempt employees monthly. So, as always, if you have questions, feel free to drop them below, or you can always find us online at valorpayrollsolutions.com. Thanks for watching.